is there a story about the nWo logo and somebody not getting paid for creating that?
Yeah, it's actually a crazy story because, and I didn't even know this when I was starting to do the book, but the person who actually sat down and designed the logo was unknown. No one knew who this person was for almost
Right.
30 years.
Wow.
And like you just said, Michael, like that logo is iconic. I mean,
Yes.
that logo was iconic for wrestling fans, but also in pop culture. It's got to be one of like the most recognizable logos as far as pop culture in the entire country, if not the world. And no one knew who designed it for almost 30 years. And it took a lot of reporting acumen on my part and a lot of like, cold calling folks.
Yeah.
People think that I'm crazy. Like, what are you even talking about? In 1996, that was 30 years ago.
Right.
But I finally tracked her down, and she's like a real estate agent right now in Winter Park, Florida. And she did the logo, and it was just like a regular day for her. People from WCW came in to Disney MGM Studios where she worked, and they were like, "We need a logo like in an hour." And she's like, "All right, yeah, cool." And that was really it. And then she went about her life, not really having an idea of just how much impact that logo
Wow.
had. And the first thing that she asked me during the interview, man, before we even started like the actual Q&A portion, she was like, "So how many t-shirts did they sell?" And I'm like, "Jenny, you don't want to know because millions of dollars worth of t-shirts, and she did not see a penny of it."
Oh no. Is she I mean I would think I would probably be a little bitter about that. How does she feel about that, Mark?
She's not bitter about it. She's fine because that's just, I mean, for some creatives, that's how it goes. Like
Yeah.
you do a job, you get paid your salary, and that's it. You don't get revenue from whatever you produce. That's
Right.
just kind of the way it goes. But for her to kind of be reintroduced to this world of wrestling again, which she was only part of for a very like an hour in 1996, she got to tell her son who recognized the logo as something, didn't know quite what it was, but she got to tell her son that, hey, I designed that logo, and now like Kendall Jenner has worn it,
Right.
and Kevin Durant wore it, and like Aziz Ansari wore it, and it's like this iconic logo. So it kind of made, for a mom, it kind of made her more cool to her son. That was the biggest thing, at least currently for her. I've always talked over the years about wrestling kind of being everywhere,
Yeah.
seeing wrestling and everything, especially, in American culture from, media to politics to music to sports. I mean, there's elements of it everywhere. And I've always talked about that. And a few years ago, I wrote about the nWo going into the WWE Hall of Fame for ESPN. And I kind of overwrote the story because that was like my time period of like growing up watching wrestling. And I think I wrote like 2,000 words when I should have written like 500.
Right.
And a year and a half later, I get an email from an editor, or at least someone claiming to be an editor from Simon and Schuster, the biggest, or one of the biggest
Yeah.
book publishers in the world. And this alleged editor is asking me if I want to write a book about the nWo. And honestly, the first thing that I thought, Michael, was like, well, this is BS. There's no way
Right.
this is like a Nigerian prince trying to steal
Right.
my money. But it was real. I Googled the editor's name, and then we spoke on the
Yeah.
phone, and we really ended up having like a shared vision of what the nWo meant to wrestling and
Yeah.
what wrestling has meant to greater society, and then it was kind of off to the races.
I've got to imagine for a guy who is a big wrestling fan, for them to come to you with that offer. I mean, writing a book is a big deal, period. But to write a book about something that you love and are so personally into, that had to be an awesome moment.
Yeah, and I feel like we're always kind of connected to the wrestling that we grew up watching. And
Yeah.
for me, it was the 90s, right? I'm 40 years old, and I was 11 when the nWo started, and they really it really was like the first time that in my lifetime that wrestling was cool, because before the nWo, like you didn't really want to admit that you were a wrestling fan,
Right.
right? There was like this stigma against it, and it was like, kind of hokey and cartoony. And then when the nWo happened, it was like everything turned, and then all of a sudden the cool kids at school were the ones watching wrestling, and you needed to be in with the hip crowd and watch Monday Night Raw and Monday Nitro to know what was going on and be considered like one of the cool kids at school.
Right.
So it totally flipped, and I was right there for it. And like writing a book about that is like what a dream come true, right? Because that was my childhood. Like I remember that stuff vividly. Like I have vivid memories of like watching wrestling back then, and Hulk Hogan turning heel, and where I was and whatnot, as many wrestling fans or Laps fans do.
So is that their I don't know if it's even possible to sum up what their legacy is, Mark, but is that the legacy that they sort of even changed how a whole generation of fans like looked at the entire sport of professional wrestling?
Yeah, I mean 100% because the wrestling business at that time in 96 was not doing well. WWF just came off the steroid trial where they took a major hit financially and reputationally, and WCW was never really even considered any kind of a threat. It was a second-rate promotion, and the nWo kind of almost helped resuscitate the wrestling business. And then that is what led, like, it was the chain reaction that led to Vince McMahon adjusting his philosophy, which then, bred the Attitude Era, Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock. By the way, The Rock started there, and now he's like the biggest star in Hollywood. I mean, it was really the chain reaction. It was the catalyst for that big wrestling boom that, in 98 and 99, they were cutting into the ratings of Monday Night Football. I mean, 10%
Wow.
drop in Monday Night Football because of wrestling. More than 10 million people combined on Monday nights in that time period were watching wrestling. And,
Wow.
the thing about that today is like it was really, really a huge part of pop culture. You saw NWO shirts and Austin 316 shirts
Right.
everywhere during that time period.
That's incredible. I didn't know that about the ratings. I mean, to obviously understand now, nothing touches football.
Yeah.
Wow. Insane. How was everybody? How was like the wrestling community? Were they open to you doing this, to you writing the book? Were they willing to talk to you and contribute in ways, or were they not for it? What was the sort of the feeling amongst the wrestling community?
Yeah, I mean they're pretty open. The wrestling industry is very unique. It's very special, and the more you learn about it, like the more fascinated I get about it because it's also extremely misunderstood. I think wrestling, a lot of people like the folks who are not into it just think that it's like some kind of a fake sport, and I mean it is. I mean I'm not even gonna lie, right? It is a fake sport, but like the performances and the athleticism
Yeah.
and their ability to control crowds and manipulate people. And it's almost like a sociological experiment, like every time they go on the air in front of live crowds to see, what works and what doesn't. And there's no
Right.
medium like that. So I just have like this incredible reverence for wrestling. And I tried to, give that off when I was doing the interviews and when I was writing the book, because it really is like, to me, the most unique form of entertainment there is because it's interactive, it's in front of a live crowd. They get one take, right? They
Right.
can't screw it up. They have to do it. And the way they're able to kind of listen to what the crowd is saying and then move the storylines kind of in that direction, there's nothing that can be like more current than that as far as entertainment. There's nothing that kind of mirrors like the real world and what's happening more than pro wrestling.
Yeah, and while it might be scripted, I mean the physicality and like you said, the athleticism, that's all real. The injuries, I mean, you cover MMA and football. I mean, you could put some wrestling injuries right up there, if not even worse than I think you see in MMA and in football and other physical true sports out there.
100%. I remember Tyron Woodley, former UFC welterweight champion, also a guy that you guys are familiar with
Yeah,
at TMZ very much. He tried wrestling. He went down to the WWE Performance Center in Orlando. This is a guy that was one of the best MMA fighters in the
yeah,
world for a period of time, and he was like, "Nah, I'm good. I'm gonna stick to MMA. This is beating up my body. Even running the ropes hurts. Like, are you kidding me?"
right.
So that's kind of the perspective. It's like, man, it's really like for people that don't understand, they really don't know how physical and how dangerous and how strenuous that type of stuff is. Because again, okay, now you're in your underwear in front of 20,000
Yeah.
people, and you got to pull off like these stunts. You got to go through tables. You got to jump off the top rope. I mean, it's nuts. It's really crazy what these guys and girls do. It's a book that could appeal to all people, from the hardcore fans who
Yeah.
already know a lot of the story of the NWO to those who are not big wrestling fans. And that's the audience that I really wanted to target a lot, because I think that in today's day and age, we need to have a different perspective of what wrestling is. I mean, the president of the United States is in the WWE Hall of Fame. And I interviewed people from, sociologists to pop culture experts to college professors about like the phenomenon that is pro wrestling into pop culture, into politics, into the greater world. And I even interviewed Andrew Yang, who ran for president a few years ago, right?
Yeah.
And he was a wrestling fan growing up, and he said he felt like he understood Trump more than his peers did, because he understood wrestling and how he was approaching like the crowds and the
Really.
chanting and the kind of the manipulation of the masses that he was
Right.
so effective and continues to be effective at. And a lot of that comes from pro wrestling. Trump was there in the 80s hosting WrestleMania. He did an angle with Vince McMahon where he shaved his head at WrestleMania. I mean,
Right.
it's like he really learned a lot from that business. And again, The Rock is, the biggest star in Hollywood. Bad Bunny is, he wrestles at WrestleMania, and he's one of the biggest recording artists. And all the hip hop stars that have written about and sung and had lyrics about wrestling. I mean, it's so embedded in our culture, and it really all started from the NWO, like in the 90s. That was what kicked it all off.